Trump has succeeded. He has shut the border down. There are no border crossings virtually happening right now in this country.
US President Donald Trump is reportedly considering suspending the right for migrants to challenge their detention in court. A top aide to the president says the constitution changes are allowed in a time when the country is experiencing an invasion. The writ of Habeas corpus has been suspended 4 times since the constitution was adopted, with 3 times being authorised by Congress. The idea was revealed after a judge ordered the release of an international university student in the custody of US immigration authorities after a challenge to her detention.
Let's go to New York now, sanctuary city, another sanctuary city. And it's seen more gang violence. This time we've had illegal immigrants, some very young ones, targeting police officers.
Well, new video out of New York City tonight of teenage Venezuelan migrants alleged to be Tren de Aragua gang members attacking 2 NYPD officers in Times Square.
Josh, the officers were attacked while trying to break up a wolf pack style robbery. Tell me about these offenders, this sort of violence that we're seeing. Some of the members of this gang are teenagers. Some are as young as 12.
So Tren de Aragua, just so everyone is aware, this is the Venezuelan gang. They are on the same level as MS-13, as among the most absolute vicious transnational criminal gangs in the entire Western Hemisphere. MS-13 has its origins in El Salvador, and Tren de Aragua has its origins in Venezuela. So this is the very gang, actually, that Donald Trump made a lot of headlines a couple months ago for invoking the 18th century Alien Enemies Act, this kind of older statute, which would allow him, in theory, if he was not facing an unprecedented judicial insurrection, in theory, theory, invoking the statute would allow him to expedite these highly necessary deportations. So the point, Rita, is that if Donald Trump and his DHS, his ICE, Tom Homan, the border czar, Christy Noam at DHS, if they have been able to do their job, if these Article 3 black-robed Oracle judicial tyrants had allowed the executive branch to actually enforce this nation's immigration law, I think it's entirely possible that footage never would have existed. These people, it's entirely possible they never would have been. In fact, it's probably likely that they would never have been in this country in the first place there. But unfortunately, when it comes to a city like New York City, and I'm from the New York area, most of my family still lives in the area there, this is unfortunately run-of-the-mill here. In Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, Washington, Boston, which we were just talking about, this is run-of-the-mill stuff in Blue City America. The good news, as someone who lives in Florida, I can speak to this. The good news is that migration trends in America are away from blue city left-wing hellholes like New York City and Los Angeles. People are flocking to cities like Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, like Miami, Florida, South Florida there. And, oh, gee, I wonder why. It's definitely partially, I would say, for footage just like this.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned the term judicial insurrection there. I like that. I haven't heard that before. But we do have a constitutional crisis, and it's not emanating from the White House. It is from these activist judges who think they can usurp the power of the president, usurp the democratic process, the will of the American people. How is that travelling? Where are we with that?
Well, Rita, I'm glad that you like the term. I'm pretty sure that I was one who actually coined it. So I'm quite happy myself with the term judicial insurrection. It's actually caught on a little bit here in American media, but it really is pretty unprecedented. I mean, Donald Trump, during his first 4 years as president from 2017 to 2021, he faced 65 so-called nationwide injunctions, which, by the way, is more than the first 44 presidents combined. And there was a case in 2018 called Trump versus Hawaii, the so-called travel ban case. Justice Clarence Thomas very presciently said in a concurring opinion, he said, you know what? Unless this just dies down of its own accord, we're going to have to confront this sooner rather than later, this issue of these so-called lower court nationwide injunctions. That was 7 years ago, and here we are, and it's still just raging like wildfire. So the good news, potentially, is that next week on Thursday, there is a birthright citizenship oral argument of the U.S. Supreme Court. But they're not actually going to be arguing the 14th Amendment merits of birthright citizenship. Rather, this is going to be an argument about the scope of the injunction power of the federal courts. This is actually a really golden opportunity, if the justice actually wanted to do so, to define what the judicial power in our constitutional order means and what it does not mean. I'm cautiously optimistic that they will not let that opportunity go to waste there. But as with all things judicial branch related, Rita, I can only be cautiously optimistic. I've just been burned too many times before to be just particularly gung-ho about it either.